Baker, Interim Executive Director and Program Manager for Housing and Credit Counseling. She's a frequent speaker at the annual USDA Rural Development Rental Housing Conference and Kansas chapter of the National Association of Housing and Redevelopment Officials. Teresa is requested by municipalities across Kansas to train their citizens and staff and speaks to various landlord and apartment associations throughout the state. She is HCCI's representative to groups as diverse as local homeless shelters, prisons, social services organizations, service members, law enforcement, and code enforcement. Teresa has been a self-employed consultant for landlords and a trusted resource for various Kansas housing officials. She's an educator, an advocate who believes in the power of people to learn and change their circumstances for the better. She feels her greatest accomplishment was serving in the U.S. Army. Thank you for your service, by the way. Please welcome Teresa Baker.
Hello. Did everybody get a full tummy?
Yeah.
It looked really good. Situated here. Well, you guys have a big group. I was here, I think about 4 or 5 years ago, and I think you might be a little bit bigger group, but I see some different faces. So I see one face back there I know, with some scrambled eggs in her mouth. So I am Teresa Baker, and I, as this gentleman said, I am the Interim Executive Director of Housing and Credit Counseling. Our Executive Director, Marilyn Stanley, was at Housing and Credit Counseling for 22 years, and she decided that she wanted a life. So she now works at Kansas Housing Resources Corporation, and she doesn't know how to feel working 8 to 5 and getting weekends off, because that doesn't happen very often in the nonprofit world. So with that, I also manage the tenant and landlord program and the Hope Financial Coaching Program, and I'll talk a little bit about that in just a moment. I'm going to try not to walk around too much. Okay, so today we are going to talk about fair housing, and the gentleman that spoke before me did a great job, and I'm going to do a lot more of that, so please excuse me telling you don't do this and don't do that, but it's my job to protect you. A little bit about our agency, for those that may not know about us. We've been in business since 1972. We started out as a nonprofit agency, and it was more of a, right off the tails of the civil rights movement, and I would call it a little bit radical at the time. It's not that anymore, but it's evolved quite a bit. We started out as a tenant complaint center back in the day, and it's not like that at all these days. I fully believe that people have the power to change their circumstances if they're willing to do that. So when tenants call us and talk to us about their landlord, we want to get both sides of the story. We typically find out that sometimes tenants are not telling us the full story. I know that there's landlords in this audience, and we do hear both sides, and we always know when people aren't telling us the truth. So they'll, for example, say, oh, my toilet has been running for weeks and weeks and weeks, and I have all these maintenance issues, and I'm like, wait for it, and I haven't paid rent in 6 months. Oh, okay. Well, not that it's cold maintenance, but I just want to let you know that we do know both sides of the story, and we counsel landlords as well. We have consumer credit counseling. We started this back in the 80s. And that is, we'll talk to people when they are having issues budgeting. Maybe they are having student loan problems. The average student loan is about $30,000. In the state of Kansas, $32,000. So we'll talk to them about options in regard to that. We talk to people when they are about to perhaps file bankruptcy, and they have to take a class for bankruptcy, pre and post bankruptcy that's mandated. We also counsel people when they have too much month at the end of the money, and we talk to a lot of people like that. And people that want to buy a home, that's one of our most popular things that people call us about. They want to buy a home, so they want to improve their credit score. And then that leads me into home buyer. This, even though tenant landlord is what I do, home buyer is my favorite program because I only hear bad stories, and this is a good story. So usually people come in and they're usually not ready to buy a home. We counsel a lot of people, their credit scores are maybe in the 400 range. And so we don't do anything for them. We teach them what to do to fix their credit score, to get it up. So we have numerous success stories. it's funny with all the financial issues this year, and I was talking to Linda just a few minutes ago about this. You know, we thought that we were going to have numerous people calling us about, you know, mortgage foreclosure and not being able to pay their bills, but there's been so much money circulating, you know, stimulus checks and things like that, that our financial counseling is actually way down this year. So every time I go to a social service organization and I tell them that, they don't hardly believe me, but it's true. Tenant landlord, we've kind of leveled out. We have a lot of people calling us about the moratoriums, asking if they qualify. But home buyer, that's been up 35% this year. So we've seen a tremendous increase in home buyer counseling. We also provide a lot of education across the state. So if anybody ever wants to call us, right now we're counseling only by phone or via Zoom. For our financial counsels, it's all free. Home buyer counseling is free, and tenant landlord counseling is free. Just a little bit about our HOPE program. HOPE is a program that is funded by the United Way of Greater Topeka, and we help people when they want to coach or mentor. So someone will sign up for HOPE, and I set them up with a volunteer in the community. We have wonderful success stories. The people will meet once a week, maybe once a month. And the number one thing that they want to meet for usually is because they are having problems budgeting, or they owe past bills and they want to buy a house. And so this really gives them incentive to stay on the program. So it's a really popular program. If you have people that you have to turn away because they just don't qualify, you know, I would encourage you to send them to us, because we will work with them to get that credit score up. So we are a HUD-approved counseling agency, and therefore I have to tell you your objectives today. You need to recognize that there are 7 protected classes, which you already know, and that there are people that are afforded rights under those protected classes. Understand your rights and obligations as real estate professionals. And develop strategies for documenting compliance with laws. If you ever feel like something funny is going on, you feel very uneasy about a situation that just happened, document it. I can't say that enough. Also, realize the repercussions of fair housing violations. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. And, you know, grasp that we are all the same. We may have different skin colors, you know, look a little different, but we're all the same. And yes, some of us are slightly undercooked. So at the end of the training, because HUD wants us to do this, they want to make sure that we are doing what we say we're doing. Please fill out your education evaluations if you wouldn't mind. You can just leave them at your table, and I really appreciate that. Please ask questions today. That would be wonderful. And if I don't know the answer, I will certainly make something up. So I wanted to say that, you know, we all know this. You know, we all want to embrace equal opportunity for everyone. And I know that you all strive to do this, but I wouldn't have a job if issues didn't occur. You know, I feel like I always take this to heart. My job is to protect, usually I'm doing this for landlords, you know, is to protect people, either tenants or landlords. But I find myself, when it comes to fair housing, protecting landlords more, and real estate professionals in this case, because we live in a very litigious society. Would you agree with that? Right now? Absolutely. And so people have to be so careful. What do you think the #1 complaint is when it comes to the protected classes? Race, color, religion, national origin, disability, familial status, gender. What do you think the #1 complaint is based on? Race? Race is #2. #1 for the last sex. Sex is getting up there, but it's not up there yet. Familial status? No.
Religion?
Yes. Handicap, disability. That's the #1 for numerous years. And there are people that usually it's because of ignorance on the landlord's part, for example, because they just don't know the law. So maybe they're denying somebody's emotional support animal, or they're not going to help somebody put in a wheelchair ramp, things like that. Not that they have to do the work, but they have to allow it. That gets people in a lot of trouble. So we're just going to start at the very beginning and talk to you about the protected classes. And you all know these things, you know, race. You know, race is based on things like, you know, hair, maybe the hair texture, eye shape, things of that nature, color of your skin. Religion, your beliefs or practices. National origin, that's where your people are from, where they migrated from. Gender, familial status, presence of children under the age of 18, or people that are pregnant, or could be someone who is securing a child as an adoption. Disability or handicap. So I always have to start off with the ugly because I want to see how far we have progressed. We all know about blockbusting. I know you took that class whenever you were becoming a real estate agent. You had to learn about this. This became very popular after World War II. It was an ugly practice. There was some naughty real estate agents that approached homeowners and they scared them to death at that time because we lived in a very different world. They lied to people. They said that there were people of color were coming into their neighborhoods and they were going to lower their home. It was going to lower the value of their home. So people were, Caucasian people were selling their houses in droves and moving. So the real estate agents were taking advantage of this, and they were selling those homes to the people of color in those neighborhoods and increasing the sales to make money. So it was a very, very ugly practice. This still occurs today. Things like redlining and blockbusting, but just in different ways. So talk a little bit about redlining. And that's where we know where a map was drawn. Actually, a map was drawn, and people actually put red lines around it to show different various neighborhoods, that undesirable neighborhoods, so to speak. It was a discriminatory practice introduced back in the 1930s, lasted until the Federal Fair Housing Act came into action. Lenders and limited loans and mortgages, insurance, and other products within specific red line neighborhoods. Redlining, it shaped our neighborhoods. It did. We can look in Topeka, can't we, I think, and we can see where redlining occurred. I have a friend here that used to work for the city of Topeka, and we used to talk about this a lot, where it occurred. And it does continue today. For example, when banks deny loans based on someone's race, that happens. When real estate agents steer people toward neighborhoods based on their race or color, that still happens. And I will tell you that and I research this a lot, this doesn't happen a lot in Topeka, Kansas. It happens a lot across the United States, though. The Department of Justice, announced a settlement with a company, Hudson City Savings Bank, for $33 million for redlining. There was an investigation, and it found that people were avoiding doing mortgage business with African Americans and Latinos for a 4-year period. The Justice Department called it the largest residential mortgage redlining settlement in history. When it comes to fair housing violations, I always tell, landlords, real estate professionals, that it's not, even if it's ignorance, and this isn't ignorance, this was on purpose, it's not, I'm sorry, and, you're going to walk away. It's going to be, you're going to get your bottom spanked, and you're going to pay some money, a lot of money. It's not $50 and I'm sorry. It's thousands of dollars, thousands, and a lot of other mandated things. October in 2020 in Kansas City. I don't know if you've heard about this since it's local. There's a National Fair Housing Alliance group in Kansas City. It examined thousands of homes in Jackson, Clay, Potawatomi, Platte counties of Missouri, and Wyandotte, Johnson, and Leavenworth in Kansas. In June of 2020, 53% of 4,550 homes listed in predominantly white zip codes were offered Redfin Real Estate Brokerage Firm's best available service. So I just want to say, I say the names of the companies because you can read about it. It's not a secret. Otherwise, I wouldn't say the names of them. Of the 218 homes located in non-white zip codes, only 16, or about 7% were offered to people who were of color. So anyway, you can read the information yourself, but the lawsuit is still occurring. It's been quite a while, and it's still going on. It takes a long time. If you're ever involved in a fair housing investigation, whether small or big, it's not quick. It takes quite a while. And I'm just curious, in the audience, you don't have to say if you have, but has anyone here ever faced someone threatening to complain to HUD about your practice? It would be you, Sasha. Well, when I talk to landlords, and hundreds of them are in the audience, a couple hundred of them, they will, hands go up everywhere, because it's so common that somebody has filed a complaint against them. And I've had people telling me, that after seeing some of my classes, they'll say, I thought that you were exaggerating this until it happened to me, and it was so bad. I mean, it's really not a fun process to go through. And most of the time when I deal with people that are involved in these things, they didn't mean to do anything wrong. It was just something that they thought it was okay, whatever it was that they did, and it happened to them. I'm not saying everybody, because some people did need to do something wrong. Yes?
I realize this is kind of a vicious cycle, but how or at all is this balanced against, like the economic situation? I think of the lenders. Is it mortgage redlining, or the thing about Hudson with African American and Latino? Is that they refuse service to African American and Latino customers that otherwise would have qualified?
Yes,
Or is it
otherwise
because-
would have
okay.
qualified.
I mean,
Yes.
or is it because for, reasons that are very deep, that certain populations have and face economic struggles? I mean, that's
Right.
what I struggle with.
Yeah, that was a
on this
great
all the
question.
time.
Yes, and that does happen, where people just don't qualify. So, and we're going to talk a little bit about that later, so thank you for that really good question. So just an example of reverse redlining. The city of Miami, Florida, brought lawsuits against Wells Fargo, Bank of America, and Citigroup, alleging that the banks were steering Black and Latino applicants toward the high-interest predatory loans. So they really should not have been in the houses. They really couldn't afford to be in them. And this all happens quite a while ago, whenever our economy tanked. So the federal judge, in the beginning, a federal judge struck down the lawsuit. Then a federal appeals court reversed that decision. They said that banks could have foreseen the related harm that was going to occur, because people really could not afford these homes. So who must comply with fair housing law, and who is exempt? Everybody in this room must comply. Whether or not you are a real estate agent, mortgage broker, agent, salesperson, if you work in the office, you must comply if you work in that real estate office. So insurance companies that you deal with, and I'm not talking about this today, but of course property managers, landlords, they all must comply. Tenants and their guests must comply. Housing that is covered is apartments, duplexes, condominiums, single-family dwellings, mobile home parks. And who is exempt from the Fair Housing Act? It doesn't apply to single-family homes sold or rented, as long if there's 3 or fewer, and the person doesn't use a real estate broker to rent that house. Okay, in that case, a landlord can discriminate, except for one thing. Does anybody know what one protected class they can't discriminate in that situation? So if somebody, for example, has a disability, and the landlord owns one house and doesn't want to rent to that person because they have a disability, they can do that in that situation. But they can't do it if it involves their race, because of the Civil Rights Act of 1866. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. So, what happened there? Fair housing and advertising. Whether or not that same landlord that owned 1 or 2 houses wanted to discriminate, he could do that, he cannot do it when it comes to advertising. So he can't, for example, say, I have a single family dwelling, if you are Asian, don't apply. He can't do that anyway because of race, that person's race. But he couldn't say, because you are disabled, do not apply. That would be disgusting anyway. But so advertising, what does it include? All the things that you would think it includes, but I always want to talk about, it's not just things like newspaper and television and radio and things like that, but conversations. This is where people get in trouble. So for example, there was a case where a maintenance person was walking through a residential community saying, those people who can't speak English don't need to live here. That was a conversation. People in the office talking, and maybe other people hear them talking and report them to HUD. Conversations can get people in a lot of trouble, just like social media can get people in a lot of trouble these days. I'm just telling you, because of my business, my Facebook is locked down. I only have my friends on there. I have everything locked down because I'm a girl, right? But still, I do make my political comments sometimes. Nothing bad. But I don't want anybody to say anything about it. And my real estate agent friends, every once in a while, they like something because I think they've had a couple of glasses of wine and like it was described earlier. But you have to be so careful these days, because even if you don't mean it the way other people see it, it's amazing how there could be, all these people in the room, and we all could be, we're thinking everybody sees it like I do. Well, they don't. Everybody's very unique, and you have to really be careful about that. Oh, that's what happened. Okay, so we want to describe the property and not the people. So when you're advertising, you don't want to say something like it's an exclusive community, because that sounds like it excludes people. It's an adult building, great for singles, because that would say children are not allowed, familial status. Professionals only. It's an integrated neighborhood. That is not good to say. No children allowed. Golden agers. But things that are good is, just describing that property. It's a 4-bedroom, finished basement, tankless water heater, things of that nature. There are patterns of discrimination that, HUD looks at, and these are just 2 examples. Advertising in only select geographical areas. So this is kind of relates to your question. That's, when a real estate agent is only advertising in certain areas, like maybe just around Wanamaker, for example, here. And they don't want to advertise in other areas about homes, maybe in other areas that people might find undesirable in the city of Topeka. Using marketing photos in a way that might indicate a preference for a particular race, gender, or lifestyle. So that marketing photo, for example, only has photos of Caucasian people. What's right with these photos?
Varied.
I'm sorry?
They're varied.
They're varied, yes. Right. So we none of us look alike, right? Our families look different. We are not carbon copies of one another. So we want to advertise and show different types of people, different colors of people, and people with disabilities, things of that nature. This photo, I put this here because this is what somebody who is of color, a different race, might look at whenever they go to your property, and all they see is, or they're looking in a magazine, they only see pictures of Caucasians, for example. The same would apply if someone just saw pictures of black people, okay? African American people, or only pictures of Asian people. You might feel unwelcome. Your photos should be welcoming to everybody. Home selling in compliance with the Federal Fair Housing Act. HUD says that real estate agents can't take the following actions based on the protected classes. Refuse to show or sell a home to a buyer. I know you would never do these things. Offer different home purchase terms to different people. Steer people to a particular neighborhood, whether on purpose or by accident. Disclose details of a neighborhood related to protected classes such as religious makeup or ethnicity. And we'll talk about a couple of these in a little bit more detail. And can't disclose the family status of a neighborhood or take a buyer to a neighborhood with or without kids. You let them find out. You let your buyers find that information out. You can give them information on how to find the information in your area, but you're not supposed to do this. Answer whether the neighborhood is safe, as crime statistics may denote race. Be cautious about things. I feel like I just preached to you, and I'm sorry about that, but it's my job. Be tactful, in your response to questions when you're talking to people, when you're talking to your clients. Examples of that is client, maybe they're looking for a family-friendly neighborhood. Okay? There's nothing wrong with that question. I might say that if I had small children, I'm looking for a family-friendly neighborhood. But you need to be careful because of familial status. So they're saying they want to have kids that live next door. You might say, is a community neighborhood important to you? Please tell me what your idea home or neighborhood looks like. And the examples you would use is not that there are children there, but there's playgrounds, there's pools, there's, features, sidewalks, walking trails. That's going to get you out of trouble. That's going to keep you out of trouble. So you're describing the property and not the people that live there. Brand new housing development. Home seekers are viewing the model homes. Client asks, can you tell me what type of people have already purchased homes here? Boy, that's a loaded question, isn't it? And you know what they're probably talking about. And I use a nice one here, family status, but sometimes we're talking about something else. Real estate agents might be tempted to answer, sure, there are lots of kids here. I have a friend in the neighborhood with kids, something like that. But you could answer, I don't know each individual's makeup, but all people are welcome, okay? I know that's difficult because you're trying to sell a home, right? But, encourage them, just, look around the neighborhood. They can see usually kids outside. There's ways that they can find these things out by looking at information online, and you can direct them to that information. You're selling a home. A client is disabled, uses a wheelchair. The client gives you a list of addresses of homes he'd like to view. You've already been to a few of these homes on the list and know that they are older homes and they have tiny hallways. Maybe they don't have stairs. Do you say the halls are going to be too narrow for your wheelchair? Do you say that to them? No, don't say it to them. Let them find out themselves. You show people what they ask to see, and then they can make that determination. I know it may sound like a waste of time, your time or their time, but it's important to let them make that determination. How are you going to get up those stairs? You don't want to say that to them. You're going to need to build a wheelchair ramp. Let them they know what they need.
Question.
Yes.
So when you're working with somebody who's potentially in a wheelchair or something like that, if they were to ask you, do you know if this home would be considered ADA compliant? Is that something you can say, well, I don't know, I'm not sure, I don't know if the doorways would be wide enough, or hallways, doorways, things like that?
Yeah, that's perfect, what you just said. Yeah, you can answer their questions. I don't know if the doorways are going to be wide enough. I don't know if it's ADA compliant. If it's built after a certain year, then it should be.
Sure.
But yeah, you can just what you said is perfect. This is exactly what I just said. So, I'm new to the area. I want to be able to walk to a Catholic church. Okay, remember that we're talking about religion as a protected class. What would you tell the client if they said that? I want to be able to walk to a Catholic church. You can't do that, okay? I can't steer you towards a Catholic church, but if the person gives you a specific church, I want to be by St. Mary's Church on Oak Street. Well, yeah, you're taking them to Oak Street, okay? I'm taking them to this neighborhood. But do you understand the difference? So, and I know that these things sound like they are very insignificant in the big picture, but trust me, when I talk about all these things, I talk about them because there's lawsuits brought forth because of these types of things. You never know who you're talking to and what they're really thinking. Some people are very offended for no reason, and some people are offended for reason.
Could you say which Catholic church?
You can say which Catholic church, yeah. But usually let them direct the conversation. A home seeker is moving to Topeka from Florida, so doesn't know the area. The agent suggests you would love this school, right? But don't move to this side of town. You don't want to go to that school. You don't want your kids in that school. Yeah, big no, okay? I already saw some shaking heads, people know that. Based on race or color, that could be based on race or color as a fair housing violation. Can I find out if there are sex offenders in the neighborhood? Can they?
Yes.
Yes, that is not a protected class. Very good. Sorry?
I said, and they're everywhere.
And they're everywhere. You're right, because I looked at that map.
And it's
Yes.
in the contract.
For sale by owner. So if this is somebody, do you guys deal with people that are selling their homes by owner? Yes, because later on you contract with them because sometimes they can't sell those houses by themselves. Can a homeowner sell the home to anyone she desires and deny anyone except Christians? If they only own 1 or 2 or 3 houses, they can do that. Like we talked about earlier. Except when they're advertising, they cannot discriminate. when advertising. And I'll go back and say that that's because of the Civil Rights Act of 1866. So the same client is unable to sell her home for sale by owner, so she contracts with a real estate agent. Can she now say only Christians can apply?
No.
No, that's right. So steering, of course, is a violation of the Fair Housing Act. There's been substantial testing, and I'll talk about testing in a minute, and investigations of comments about schools and whether these comments violate fair housing laws. So HUD has documented several cases where an agent said blank school is good and blank school is bad. And I know people do this because I've bought homes and had real estate agents tell me these things, but I'm not. My husband was in the military after I got out of the military, and we would go places and people say, you don't want to live over here, you want to live here. And I kind of appreciated it because it may be crime and things like that. But knowing what I know now, I just, they probably shouldn't have said that. HUD found that these statements were in violation of fair housing laws. So, and that's because it was deemed by the investigators that good and bad schools were utilized to foster segregation and racial discrimination. So, and you know, people can go to websites if they want to see, you know, like grade schools and look at the statistics about that. So, when client asks about crime in the area, crime to some denotes race, and that could be a fair housing violation. Tell clients to visit websites to view data in their neighborhoods when it comes to things like that. Be tactful in your avoidance of discussing protected classes and steering. If they continue to ask you about things, just simply come out and say, I'm a real estate professional, I have to comply with fair housing law, I cannot answer your question in the way you're wanting me to answer it, but I can provide you with data so you can find that information. I mean, I'm sure I've had real estate agents wonderful here in Kansas, and they've always given me a packet of information with, you know, places I can find information like that. So just some examples of discrimination, misrepresentation of available houses to show them. So the owner says, I really like my neighbors and I promise them when I sell my house, I won't sell it to these people. So when these people drive up, the agent says, I'm sorry, someone just made an offer on the house. Okay, you know, you're not, don't, you know, if you're selling, that's very unusual, but it has happened. Otherwise, it wouldn't be on there. So if somebody does something like that and you're selling the house for them, you know, just let them know you are a professional. Setting up different standards for different people. You really emphasize to Latinos they should be pre-approved for a home loan, but you don't do that for everybody else. Okay. Preference advertising in newspapers, saying no children. Refusing to work with a customer or client because they do not speak English. This actually happens more than you might think in both landlord-tenant law and also in real estate law. People, there have been cases where the people who do not speak English very well, they don't get called back as much. So everybody's money's green. That's all most of you care about, right? Is your money's green, you have good credit, things like that.
I have a question on that.
Yes.
So obviously I don't speak Spanish, or I speak very, very little.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't be able to serve that client. Can I refer them to someone else that I know is Spanish speaking and would be able to serve them better?
There's nothing wrong with that. We have, for example, in our office, we have three bilingual counselors, and it happens all the time. You know, they call and we're having a hard time speaking to one another, so I say, would you like to speak to someone who's bilingual? 90% of them say yes, sometimes they say no. So I ask them what they would like.
Okay.
And oftentimes they'll bring their children and they have to interpret, which is very sad when I've had to tell people that are 9 years old, your mommy's going to be evicted. But that things like that have happened. Yes.
What's the level of obligation on that, though? If Shannon refers out to someone who speaks the foreign language that she doesn't, is she obligated to take that step, or can she simply say, no, I'm not going to be able to serve you because I don't speak the language?
Well, that's the thing, you know, when it comes to, that's a very good question. When it comes to Spanish, that's a lot more prevalent in our area, so we have people who interpret a lot of times. But I like to say,
people coming from,
I like to say
like
different
the Middle
countries.
East or
Yes. And that happens a lot. For example, I was counseling people. I had to go to Olathe to counsel some people who were from, and I can't think of where they were from right now, somewhere in Asia, and we had a very difficult time talking. And no, their landlord did not have to go find someone that spoke their language. People that we don't have enough people, they could not afford it. So usually it's an issue where if you're, the people are typically going to bring somebody with them, or you're going to try to do something, but just do your best in situations like that. There are some cases, like in HUD housing, funded housing, where they would have to try to get some type of interpreter. Good question, asker. Is he?
Yeah.
I knew it. There's always one in every room. There's an attorney in the house. Watch out. Okay. We just want to treat everybody. So I know you guys have heard of testers, real estate testers. Okay. They are real. Okay. Many years ago, when I was in property management for HUD subsidized property and a tax credit property, I remember people calling me, and I could tell that the way they were asking a question, that somebody had called HUD, and that happens. And so all of a sudden, as I like to say in the Army, I got very dress right dress, very yes sir, no sir, we don't do that. Of course, I didn't discriminate anyway, right? But it made me very nervous, and you could really tell that it was a tester calling me. That happens when somebody feels like they are being discriminated against. So, and whether they were or not, they might contact HUD or a FIP agency, Fair Housing Investigation Agency, and that agency might call you. And for example, they might call you and you turn them away. And so when the Fair Housing Agency calls you, they might call you and they have a quote-unquote Caucasian voice, or a Hispanic voice, or a quote-unquote African-American voice. And maybe your answer changes with their voices. That really does happen. And if they find that you are doing that over the phone, then they might send them into your office, people of different races, to see how you're going to treat them. And bam, you're going down if that happens. So if you're denying people based on legitimate reasons, that's fine. So just be careful with that. So the National Fair Housing Alliance filed a discrimination complaint against a real estate agency in Jackson, Mississippi. The alliances sent fake couples out to shop for homes, and they found that white testers were predominantly shown white neighborhoods, while black testers were rarely called by the agents to view homes at all. So that happened a few years ago, but it happens all the time. Okay. Things like this still occur. So again, we just care about the color of people's money. The cost of discrimination is high, like I said earlier. The court could order you to stop discriminating, of course. A client can win money damages against you. They can, for emotional distress that you cause. And I'm not talking again about $100 and I'm sorry. It's a lot of money. An agent can be sued individually, or the real estate company can be sued. Somebody in the office answering the phone, they can be sued if they were answering that question improperly. The real estate, commission, this can impose disciplinary actions against you. And you could lose your job, of course. So there's a statute of limitations for anybody in here that's been naughty. So even if it was just an accident. And so an aggrieved party has 1 year to file a complaint with HUD after the alleged violation, and they may file an action in federal district court within 2 years of the alleged act. You just want to protect yourself. You want to document any worrisome issue, anything that maybe has happened in your office and it kind of felt funny. You want to document it. If you think you did something wrong, try to make it right. If you ever are involved in something like this, your attorney is going to need this information to help you. So, attorney and real estate agent. Wow, that's
Just attorney.
okay. Okay. So these are just some fair housing enforcement agencies. They can I tell, people that have questions, if we can't help you with the answer, then you can call and ask these people questions, like HUD questions, or the State of Kansas Human Relations Commission. You can ask them questions. You're not telling on yourself. Give a fake name. No, my name is John Doe. I have a question. You'll be okay. We are not an enforcement agency, but we will answer people's questions. When we counsel people, and the landlord sometimes is, the things that we're being told by the tenant, and when we hear their side of the story, sometimes landlords are being very naughty, and when that happens, I have a form for that, for everything. And so I usually just give them the naughty form. And so if you ever get a naughty form from me, it's because I care about you, okay? Don't want you to get in trouble with HUD. And you get the naughty form, and it says, if you do this, this is gonna happen. And then if you do it again, then we have to give them HUD's number. We are mandated to do that, but anyway, just wanna let you know that. We're your friends. So do you guys have any questions? We have some good questions.
I have a question about
Yes.
the testers. Do they ever do random testing? People that haven't had a complaint filed against them?
Not typically, no. They don't have the funding usually to do that, but it's a good question. You do look a little sketchy though, they might.
Take a picture out of the paper.
Yeah, I remember that picture. That was bad what you did. So I would, does anyone else have any questions? You've been very well behaved, despite what I heard about you. And if you would fill out your evaluations, I would greatly appreciate it. If there's a question on there you don't want to answer, of course, leave it blank. But again, I'll get in trouble if you don't fill them out. And thank you very much, I really appreciate it.